All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sequencing. This is where we unravel the esports DNA of my guests, so you get to learn a little bit more about them. And today, with me, we've got Gunba here, formerly of Team Blank, a World Cup representative for Australia in 2017, where they managed to make the World Finals. And I think that's a pretty good place to start. You know, being a representative of your country. So what did that feel like? You know, you played in Sydney in the group stage first, where you had a massive home crowd. It was a full packed out stadium, 2,500 people. What did that feel like?
Felt really good. I think one of the hard parts about playing in the World Cup is that when you're on stage, you can get like really nervous really easily. And I think that having the crowd on your side is always a big help. And I think like that crowd in particular was extremely biased against anyone that wasn't us, as you'd expect. I also have to be the biggest World Cup crowd, so like that was really nice, actually. Yeah, it felt really good to have the crowd behind us.
Yeah, it was a huge crowd. You know, I was lucky enough to sort of be there backstage, leaking all the Australian strats to Team Sweden, who I was managing at the time. So I was a bit of a traitor.
Yep.
I hope you forgive me. But yeah, exactly. The crowd was massive, and I know this is something you actually had talked about before when you were in Taiwan competing in the Overwatch Pacific Championship with Blank. So was that comparison like, you know, really forefront of your mind when you went out there and you had this, you know, massive like crowd cheering for you versus in Taiwan where, you know, by all reports there was not a lot of Blank fans.
Yeah. I felt that it didn't really prepare us at all in the sense that in Taiwan, there's so few people that it doesn't even compare in the sense that you're way more intimidated by the Australian crowd than by the Taiwan crowd, regardless of who they were cheering for. So I feel like it was same at BlizzCon, same kind of problem. It's just like a totally new experience no matter what. It does kind of feel ridiculous sometimes when team is so blatantly biased. Oh, sorry, the crowd is so blatantly biased for one team that you do something even small, like even a small play, and they all cheer for you, and it feels kind of ridiculous as well. Like it's not necessarily always a positive in that sense, because you know they're completely biased, and it stops working when you know that they're going to cheer no matter what. So
yeah, I suppose
it can also hype the other team too, right? The other team can also get hyped by the fact that everyone wants them to lose, and they're like, whatever, we'll show them, you know.
Yeah, and I definitely heard the Swedish guys say that behind the scenes, right? They were like, I want the crowd to be silent because then we'll know we've won.
You get to beat not just like 6 people, but like 2,006 people. You know, you get to beat the entire crowd as well, which is great.
Yeah, yeah, it was certainly a pretty special moment. How did it feel going to the world stage? You know, the world finals at BlizzCon, being there. You know, that crowd might have been a bit different as well. Was there a bigger sense of expectation there, or was it because, you know, you knew that the teams you were going up against were a lot better, that perhaps, you know, the weight was off you a bit? You were the underdogs there?
I guess there's 2 things to talk about there. One is that as far as like the event goes and the crowd goes at that event, it was actually set up differently, so the crowd was surrounding the players in like a circle. I think most people saw the arena, and what's scary about that is at the other events, OPC as well as like the Sydney stage, all the other World Cup events, you can have the monitor between you and the crowd. But when they're on every side, it's actually quite intimidating, and they're above you as well, so that's actually really scary. And it makes the sound different as well, you know, like the sound's coming from every direction. It's quite scary. As for the event and how we felt about like our position at the event as a team, I don't think we saw ourselves as underdogs. We kind of saw ourselves as overdogs that everyone else saw as underdogs. And I think like you even saw it during the match. Like we came out really strong, even up to like the 3rd map that we didn't win. We were looking. I don't want to get too off question here, but like we were looking to win, and I guess we choked there a bit. So I think we thought we were overdogs going into the event, and we could surprise people because we knew we could win anyway.
I mean, was that partly because of your draw on the side and the teams that you were possibly coming up against? Like, I can't imagine you would have felt you were overdogs if you were up against Korea or USA first, you know?
I definitely felt like, based on our like internal scrims and results and stage results and how we'd performed recently, I felt like getting to the finals was something we should have achieved. I think most of the team felt that way too. Yeah, obviously it being stacked on one side helped us a lot. I think that's like no one wants to play Korea or the USA. That being said, I mean France was probably just as good as USA, so I think that whole side was so stacked compared to ours, which makes it even worse that we lost, right? It makes it hurt more, I guess.
Yeah,
we gifted the golden road and then we just lost, you know.
What did you think of I Eat You Up's 3-0 signal at the camera?
It's probably my fault. I've been mentioning that someone should do that on stage, and here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And he had like the prime position, like right in front of like
Right in
he
front of the
was on like
camera.
left stage, right? Yes,
Yeah.
the camera was right there. So it's unfortunate we weren't able to close that one out, and it made him look really bad, I guess. But he played really well, so I'm sure he's fine.
Yeah, no, as he always does.
He also
What
stole my shoe
he
while I'm
makes?
on topic. He's borrowing my shoes from China that we bought, and like he hasn't paid me for them.
Oh, he's still got
Give me my
them.
money. Yeah, yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
He's got my Nike shoes, dude. He stole them.
Damn, the kicks. Um, what was it like having Atar and Kiki there? So obviously, at the Sydney stage, you were that was the blank team at the time. You guys were all great together, and then season 2, you made some roster changes, obviously bringing Huss and Huu in, and then so you hadn't played with these guys for a long time. They weren't active in any teams. Like I'm not sure exactly how much they were playing ladder or keeping sharp. But obviously for them to come back in, the meta's changed. It's all a little bit different. How did it feel with them slotting back into the team in the playoffs?
Okay, so as far as comp goes, they both did play comp. They were both like 4,500 plus on the Australian servers, which is obviously really high for their servers. So as far as their mechanics went, they were fine, I think. As for the meta was more or less the same for them. So they played the same heroes into the same heroes, and all they really had to learn was how to deal with Mercy.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge in itself, but I think Canada were just as bad on that front in terms of like they hadn't had much experience on patch either, right? So definitely felt like we had the advantage going into the sort of meta matchup, even though like 2 of our players hadn't played it. As far as them slotting in goes, Kiki was just like a 1-for-1. Like, I think Hu is like a really strong performer, so we lost that. And obviously Kiki's like hasn't been as strong historically, so that's unfortunate. But Kiki's really good for like team morale, so there was like that trade-off. And Atar, he came in and I think he's like the opposite of us. He's way stronger with Genji than with the hit scan.
Yeah.
So it threw our whole team off in a sense that like we had to play around Atar rather than playing around the hit scan. And the hit scan typically enables your backline, right? And Atar requires resources rather than giving them. So like we had that problem where I think it was really odd for our backline to play with Atar. And you saw some like weird team play from us as a result of that, just having to deal with playing with a Genji and not having dealt with that before. You have to like pocket him during his blades. He doesn't peel for you as a support player, stuff like that. So you lose a lot. Like that makes the game really easy for supports when you have that Genji as well.
Yeah, so you're expecting to have a bit more pressure on you as the backline, but maybe Atar's relieving that a bit more because he's doing so much, like wreaking so much havoc.
Backline, I guess.
Yeah.
If you look at like APAC, like I feel comfortable saying that like if you look at APAC itself, I was the strongest performer at APAC on Zen. Like I had the best performance on the team, and a big part of that was just the fact that I had Huss with me. So like I couldn't get forced out to use like trance by one Genji, for example, which is what happened a lot during the World Cup because I was all alone. So I think that's it's definitely like I feel it's something interesting about Zenyatta or flex support in general. It's much harder to look good when you play on like a Genji team. It's like significantly hard to actually get anything done because you don't have that backline present.
Yeah, you'd have to like take sick duels and just like
hit
a whole bunch of headshots when like the Genji dives you or something, or you're stuffed.
It's totally viable to have that comp. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying that it does make the flex support player look a lot worse when there's a Genji on your team.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you weren't happy with the result overall, but like did you have a good time at BlizzCon? I mean, you've been a Blizzard just a gamer, playing Blizzard games for a long time, right? So was it awesome just to be there in the crucible of all things Blizzard and have that experience, or did you get to look around much?
I mean, I had complete freedom after the match, so we lost really early, which on paper would be a good thing. I'm gonna be honest, like I take losses really heavily. Like I invest in this game mentally, I think a lot more than most players, and like
right.
I didn't want to talk to anybody for a whole day after we lost. Like that was me turned off. I'm done. I didn't look around BlizzCon at all. Came back like the next day. I had like a little tour with Marcus with Kiki.
Yep.
Didn't see anything too interesting. I think like I'm not that interested in other games and the WoW stuff. Whatever. Like I guess I like WoW, but it's an expansion pack. I've been through like 10 of them, so whatever.
Yeah.
It's not new. It's pretty hype to watch some of the matches after that. I think that's like the main thing I did. Just look at like the Korea match against USA and then look into the finals. So that's basically all I watched.
Were you at the arena when that happened?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome.
But again, like just losing it really turned me off thinking about anything interesting. I was just like, I'm not interested in BlizzCon at all. So I just like hid in the player room for a bit.
Oh, that's a shame, I guess. But yeah, it's good to see that.
It was a really depressing loss because I guess to like talk about the game because I think that's. Did you have a question about that? Or you just wanted to go into it?
No.
So I can just start talking about the game. Okay, great. As far as the match went, we had I think if you look at the first 2 maps, there was some throws by Canada there, but like our team play was shining ahead. Like we clearly had a better way, better understanding of how to play the meta and how to play like standard comps. And then we went to Junkertown, and like there was some kind of breakdown there at the end where like we couldn't deal with Bastion initially. So I think Junkertown's like the most important map in that series. We couldn't deal with the Bastion initially, which is I think is a common problem. Like it's hard to deal with Bastion on Junkertown. That's why people run it. But what really got us was at the end when we had like every ultimate in the game. We had like the perfect counter to everything they had, and it's just like a breakdown communication there where we like took a few fights before our Mercy had ult and stuff like that. So like we definitely threw that game, and that's fine because that would have been like a 3-1 had we got that. But like what made it worse is that like we kept playing badly after that. So like we kind of tilted from that Junkertown loss. Yeah, and like we couldn't deal well with Pharah as well because of the ATAR Genji thing. So we had that problem as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a bunch of things in the series that were just.
The last map was Nepal or something, was it? I think.
Yeah, so it was like I think Hanamura was the map we lost. That was the 2-1.
Yeah.
And then the 3-1, the 2-2 was Junkertown.
Yeah.
And then the 3-2 was Nepal, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when Mangachu
So losing
just
Hanamura
came
was
out
fine. Like
huge on the Pharah.
he did and he didn't. I think there was like two core problems to that sort of like map and how that panned out. I think specifically the Pharah thing was 1 point. Like there was one whole point because of the Pharah, right? It was like village, yeah. And so like what happened there was, I think people were like asking Red like, why didn't we swap? Why didn't we swap heroes? Why didn't we deal with that? And it's just because you don't need to swap to deal with Pharah is the problem, but you do need to deal with Pharah. So like I think our plan in scrims, and this has always been what I've done with Huss, and again this is probably one of the things where ATAR is not as experienced, is that you have to coordinate shifts with your D.Va and your Winston and your Genji to get kills on Mercy and Pharah and pressure them out. And that didn't happen with the new lineup because again, two of the people that would have been dealing with Pharah hadn't done that before because they're coming back from ranked queue basically.
Of course.
So what would happen is we'd walk into the point into village for a retake because whoever said that we lost the point and that's incidental or whatever. And Pharah would just literally sit on our team as we walked in, and the whole team ignored her. And like I think that's what really cost us. It's not having that team play experience together and dealing with that hero. That's only 1 point though. So like we also I think we choked really hard on Sanctum. So the Junkrat really threw us off. We've had like PTSD there dealing with like our hands Junkrat stuff like that. That stuff it immediately tilts us, you know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Nepal's.
I know that's worked out for you before, right? Like there's lots of times in OPC where the other team's trying to bring out the Pharah, and you guys just got to clean up the rest of the team, and like you just leave the Pharah there, and you know can't do anything like 1v6 at the end of the fight, right?
Peppered by Tracer. Yeah. I feel like it's very common that you see on Reddit and people will just point out the obvious solution to the problem you had.
Yeah.
You should have run a hit scan. It's like, yeah, but we suck with hit scan. Like, so if we take that matchup, they're winning because they've got all the heroes they want, and we're playing the heroes that may counter their heroes, but Soldier's not like a hard counter to Pharah, right? Like, you don't just pick Soldier and Pharah stops playing the game. That's not how that works, you know. Mercy healings are ridiculous. So I definitely feel that was a team play issue, yeah.
I think sometimes people sort of take that, you know, oh, this worked in ranked, like, you know, why didn't it work in the World Cup finals match? And you're like, well, you know, things work a little bit differently.
They extrapolate a concept. Like, yeah, okay, Soldier does deal with Pharah, but that's like, if you look at the average win rate of Soldier against Pharah in ranked, it's probably like 10% in Soldier's favor, right? It's not like a game-winning move. It's just like a slight edge. Yeah. So, like, definitely playing the game is more important than playing the counter sometimes.
Okay.
I think that's a common like thing. If you want like advice for teams, is like I see a lot of teams, like just they want to swap comps all the time to deal with problems, whereas it prevents them from actually looking at the comp they were playing and thinking, how could we have dealt with the thing we're facing, right? Like, you can deal with Pharah with Genji. It just takes team play, which is harder to learn than swapping heroes. But if you keep swapping heroes, you never learn team play. So take the loss, learn, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. It's absolutely what you've got to do to become better and win those big matches, especially out on stage, right? So, okay. It's really interesting to see.
In that case, I guess.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, maybe you'll get there next time. Okay, next year, 2018.
That was really depressing. Probably the most depressing game of my career, by the way. I played like 50 games on stage, and that one was definitely the worst.
That's well, that's pretty big to hear. Then not even the losses against Flash Wolves and.
Yeah, but you go into those matches expecting to lose, so it's like not expecting to lose, but expecting that okay, we're not favored here. Like we're probably gonna come out like on top 1 in 10 games here. So let's try and make it that game. Like, you lose, and you're like, okay, I was sort of mentally prepared for this. But when you lose to Canada, a team that like honestly didn't play that well, like they had like agilities on Genji playing super well. He had a bit of trouble with Tracer, and like Mangachu got like left on in Pharah a lot, and then Shorefall was really good. So they had some good performances, but as a team, their team play wasn't that strong.
To be fair, they did make the finals though.
They did, but again, that was just because it's the side of the bracket we're on. Like, if they beat us, I think they beat Sweden, was it?
Yeah, they beat. Yeah.
And Sweden were looking extremely weak. So, like, again, it was just like the golden road on our side of the bracket. And, you know, I think Canada took our spot on that golden road a little bit. So that's why that felt really bad. losing the Flash Wolves is like whatever, man. Like who cares, you know? We did our best.
Interesting. Yeah, I would have thought that the emotional content of, being over in Taiwan for months at a time, and like there's a much longer lead up to that, and I feel like you invest a lot more resources in the OPC and learning that meta and learning against those teams.
Counterpoint. Coming second means in OPC you get 50 grand USD. You know, not coming first or second in the World Cup means you get like way less exposure. So I mean, in terms of like prize, if you want to think about it that way, we got screwed a lot more in the World Cup than we did in OPC as well. Okay. You just win 50 grand, you're like, maybe lose is okay. Maybe 50 grand's good.
It's good enough. Okay. All right. Well, yeah, look, let's talk about OPC then. Obviously, that's been a big part of your life recently. I mean, I think
6 months.
Have you spent more time in Taiwan in the last year than you've spent in Australia?
Yes.
Yeah, wow. That's so what was it like living over there? What was it like being in a, I mean, we saw, I'll try and link this video. You guys did a room tour in season 1 where it went through your apartment, and it was like
went through 2 rooms.
It was like smaller than the room I'm in now, and somehow there was like 7 guys living there. So obviously, U6 and Serenity was over there in season 1 as well. So yeah, what was that like?
I think that like when you're an Australian and you get an opportunity to go overseas, sign here, please. You're going on. You straight to Taiwan. Like you accept whatever comes your way if you want to be an Australian international gamer, right? That's the deal. Maybe prove yourself a bit later and you can get better deals and better houses and stuff like that. And that's what happens, right? We did get a better house. But initially going to Taiwan, I think it's one of the best countries I've been to. I've been to like 4 countries, so small sample size, but definitely felt like living in Taiwan was so good. Like 7-Eleven every corner, Starbucks every corner. Like if you want food, you want like buy computer hardware, stuff like that, anywhere around you can do that. So I think Taiwan's definitely the best living experience I've had, but it is being away from home and being with your team 24/7, and that's a totally negative experience, right? Because like being away from home sucks. I can't even go outside and talk to people in English. Like that's just for 6 months you can't do that. That's frustrating. And like you look at like the whole thing. Every time you have like a dispute with someone on your team, and you finish your scrim, and you're like, man, I hate this person. I'm so angry at them. Like that scrim was really frustrating, and then they're still there. Like you've turned your computer off, and this person is still there. It's just like no,
they're like literally sitting right next to you.
Yeah, they're looking at you with their beady eyes and like, hey, don't like you. All right. So yeah, I definitely think that living abroad, even if the country is good, and I think people still live like Apex with Korea, it's still a negative experience solely because of the living conditions, right?
Okay, so are you saying if you were in? Okay, so to contrast the the tour of your house, we had the tour of the Flash Wolves house, right? That the OPC videographer also did. It was like a palace. They were just like, it was room after room. They had
the video went for like 30 minutes.
Yeah, there was like rooms house dedicated to just like sitting around and playing. They had their room for the computers. They all had their rooms to sleep in. It looked very nice. It was palatial, right? So are you saying if you had somewhere to live like that, if you had an organization that could back you with those kind of resources, would that experience be a positive experience then?
It'd be a better experience. It would be a positive experience. I still think it's the living in another country problem. Like you're living somewhere other than your home country, which is always a struggle, especially if you don't get your own, like even those Flash Wolves guys don't have their own like rooms and stuff like that. They still just shared like rooms with their teammates, right?
Yeah.
So I think their experience was a lot better than ours. Of course it was. And again, being at home, if they want to go see their parents or they're sick of their team or whatever, they can still do that. Like it's a 1-hour train ride for Zonda to go home, for example. Like it's not that bad, But I definitely think having a better house would have helped. Like and having more resources and stuff like that, and more staff and things like that. That's always going to be a positive.
Well, I guess as you said, you guys were just happy to get over there, happy to start propelling yourself onto the world stage.
It's amazing what you'll put up with when you want to be a pro gamer. And like that's part of the deal, right? You want to be a pro gamer, you're going to have to deal with some problems. You look at success stories like XQC and stuff, and they were doing it tough from the start. Like they did something that people would look at, like those players like XQC and other players that had that sort of start, and they would say, this guy's an idiot. Like, what is he doing with his life? This is a bad idea. And fast forward to now, and he was right. And it's like that's what being a pro player is, right? It's just accepting the initial loss for the eventual gains, hopefully. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes these people just don't achieve anything, and that's sad. But
I just realized I had my Skype notification bar on the bottom of your screen, but I'll get that out for the last half of the video. Okay, so Right, so you're living in there. You're living with, all the blank boys. But what was the decision like to move over there? Okay, because it wasn't like this for everyone on the team. You had a full-time job before you went over there, being slightly older compared to some of the other players. Like, so how do you make?
And good looking.
Yeah, exactly. Got all that going in your favor, right? So how do you make that decision? Like, what were you weighing up when you had to put that aside and say, like, okay, I'm just going to completely forego this career and dive into esports?
Firstly, I think I'm talented at the job I had as a software engineer. Like I was new to it, but I was quite good. Like I feel like if I had to go and do that again, I could get a job doing that. I've worked in a work environment where I know that compared to most people who do these jobs, I can do better, right? So I feel like in that sense, I don't worry about the job security aspect too much. One of the things that helped though is I had a coworker who sat across from me, like really smart guy, really accomplished, and like one of the things he said to me was, I was going to be like a windsurfing professional. I think it was windsurfing. It was something like that, some kind of like water sport thing. And he's going to be like, I'm going to be a professional at this. And when he was young, he decided not to do that to be a software engineer. And he's like, he said that he regretted it his whole life. And that's windsurfing. Like that's not exactly the most like profitable career compared to like esports. So if he regrets that, I'm definitely going to regret not trying esports. So yeah, he said he had a lot of friends and stuff who were like big time professionals now at that sport, and like he saw them on Facebook and stuff and Twitter and whatever, always just having fun and doing this thing they love doing. And he only gets to do it as a hobby because he chose to do it. He chose to do software engineering first. I think that's like a regret that I didn't want to have. So it seemed like an obvious choice to me. And the prize pools in this tournament are really big, so it seems like financially quite viable. I think I made like, I won't give it too much away, but I made a similar amount of money doing esports for 6 months as I did working as a software engineer for 1 year. So, and that's probably because OPC's prize pools are enormous and like double World Cup payments and stuff like that. So again, not the most like common sample size here. Like you expect most cases to be a bit like less profitable, but it worked out really well. So I think financially and in terms of like my life, it was a good choice.
And considering that things are probably only going to get better from here, right? I mean, I guess the hope from everyone on Blank is to, move into Overwatch League and keep going up the ladder, or even if they don't make it to that level, anything that happens in Australia in the future, like, hopefully we're going to get contenders in 2018 and all that sort of stuff. Once we start getting those bigger prize pools here, that means, the orgs are going to start investing more. We've already seen McDonald's has sponsored the StarCraft tournaments going on here in ANZ, so I feel like there's money out there to be had. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like this is a really easy thing to do. I mean, you guys were the best team in Australia. This is not everyone is doing this, right? There was only 6 of you, and it wasn't.
Let's talk a bit about that actually. Just like the kind of work we had to do to get from being a new team to being one, and why that's not reasonable sometimes for other teams to do, at least until this.
Let's go back to the Fusion Girls days.
Okay, so we started with I think it was like Tempo Storm AU. That was like the team I created. And yeah, I got kicked from that team for being toxic, and I was, so that was a great learning experience. Yeah. I still like those guys. I talk to them all the time. I've helped them with Overwatch, and like they were alright, so that was important for me to learn. But after that, we got into the Fusion Girls roster because Jam Gaming was like the best team at that point. It was like us and them. So I got reunited with RQT, and we made that team. We made Jam Gaming, and then eventually Fusion Girls and Blank. And what really sets us apart is that like we stacked the roster super hard straight away. So we picked all the players we felt were the best in terms of like attitude, skill, stuff like that. We had no weak links at all. Eventually, I think like Dozer was probably the weak link. Like he's retired now. Like he'd admit this. I'm not like blaming him. Nice. He wasn't that keen on the game, so we got in 8 instead. I think at that time, and then I took over Dozer's role as a flex support. So that's how a team came about.
And that's going to be like the biggest pickup in like the history of the AU scene, right? Picking up. Eat up from the ladder into like
I mean he was initially like quite toxic, and like we had that realization eventually that he can't do that, and we eventually got him back online, and he's improved so much as a person, I think, over time. So it's like it's important to see how like people like me and him can start off as quite toxic and still improve. I think that's like important to remember. So we got that roster together, and it was like really strong. It was good, winning all the tournaments, and we started realizing that we need to find better ways to improve. Like, we're not going to ever get to where we want to be just by smashing Australian teams into the floor. And so one of the ways we did that was we started using VPNs to scrim Korean teams. And we did that by actually blocking the Korean server so that we get put on Japan every time we scrim them. And then we'd start the scrim or the practice with these Korean teams, and we'd get put on the Japanese server. Their ping would be like 50, 60, which they're not used to. and would say, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know. Who knows?
Were you just lying to them?
A little bit, yeah. And some of them are okay with it. They figured it out, whatever. But like, we started to get more consistent scrim partners. Like even GC Basan was one of those scrim partners back then.
Wow. How did you guys go against them back then?
Oh, they sucked. We'd smash them all the time, and then like over time they got better. Which I'll get into.
So what you're saying here is blank is the best team in the world.
Well, okay. Probably another thing to learn from this. It's like how much have they improved in that time versus us? Like Korean teams improve really well with their support stuff and stuff like that. So that's a good case of that. A team that like got crushed by us repeatedly, now winning Apex. So we're scrimming like Korean teams and really high ping, and like that transitioned into Lost Murdos because we got Eat's friend Serenity is a Taiwanese translator, so he came in and helped us do this tournament like Lost Murdos, and so we got to beat all the Taiwanese teams.
Yep.
Yeah, online we got to beat all the Taiwanese teams and win like $12,000 in 5 weeks, which is ridiculous. And then that led into OPC. So like I think our transition, if you look at all the things that lined up for that to happen, totally not realistic for any other team. Like other teams tell me, like I've had teams ask me, how do we get our team into OPC? How do we get a good org? How do we do this and that? It's like I just tell you can't do that. Like the pathway we took isn't open anymore, and it was like luck that it was open, and I think that's a big problem. So like, I think to address like the point of all this is that there needs to be an Australian infrastructure that leads into like an international tournament, so that the best Australian team does get a chance to go overseas. Even if it's just one team, like as long as that's a competitive slot that people can fight for, go overseas, come back to the Australian tournament, stuff like that, I think that'd be really good.
So do you think something like Australian contenders would be enough to make that happen if we had a tournament? So I'm assuming, let's say the prize pool is similar to the NA and EU ones we've seen this year, which I think, was it $50,000 or $100,000? Can't remember.
100,000 total and 50,000 first place. I think. Maybe I'm crazy. That's right.
For both NA and EU. Yeah. Okay. So
yeah. I think that's USD, so I don't know how much we'd get, but probably less, which should be fair enough. So
yeah, okay.
Maybe not.
That's still pretty, but that's still massive, right? And
yep.
It starts getting to that level where the orgs can afford to, start putting some proper work into the team, hiring the support staff, like you said, the kind of things that make you level up as a team a lot faster. Maybe if you get like the top 1 or 2 teams from contenders, they get invited to some sort of like global Blizz thing to play off against the other contenders teams, and it's just like a bit of a showcase tournament to like our teams can pick people out of, or even if there's more APAC invitationals where you're not seeing Overwatch League level teams go to that, and you just get that sort of thing. Like maybe that's a way.
So let's talk about a problem here. I think like the structure that we're seeing, I think I see where you're going with this, and like the structure is that AU teams playing contenders, and they practice against other A teams, and then once every so often they get to go. Yeah, see the problem. Once every so often they get to go overseas.
Yeah.
And we've seen this with League of Legends, and none of the Australian teams have ever won anything in
They
League of
just get
Legends.
crushed.
They get crushed every time, and like if you look at teams like Envious and teams like us and any other team that has that sort of overseas exposure, it's the fact that you got to go overseas for a long period of time in practice that actually made these teams good. It made us good. It made Envious good. Like you look at Envious, before they went to Korea, they weren't the top team. Well, they were, but it was like you could see them losing to Rogue and stuff like that, Misfits and whoever was back then, right? And that did happen. They lost to those teams, and then they go to Korea for 2 seasons or something. Was that right? And they got like maybe even 3 seasons, and they got way more time in Korea than anybody else. And they come back, and then they're the best team. So that's the other problem. It's like if you do have this infrastructure where teams can earn their way out of Australia, to put it that way, then they're always going to be the best team because they'll come back and win again. So it doesn't actually allow anyone to move up, right? Let's imagine there was a qualification tournament right now in Australia for like Australian teams to qualify for NA contenders or something like that. Some kind of like transitionary thing.
Yep. We
would win straight away, and no other team would get access to that. And it's the same in NA. Like, so I don't know what the solution is there. If you want Australian teams to be internationally competitive, I don't think either of these systems actually work. But I think we're likely to get one of those systems.
Because I feel like what you're saying is actually pretty similar to the scenario in Counter-Strike right now, right? Where Renegades, they were sort of the one team that got good in Australia. They got all these opportunities overseas, and there's still people complaining about them, getting invites to like the minor qualifiers or whatever it is for the system, that where you work your way up to a major in CS. And then you've got these other teams at home, which are very, getting very good for our region, like, Greyhound, Tainted Minds, who else is good these days? I can't remember. And yeah,
Kings.
Kings, that's right. And now they're not getting those chances to go overseas as much. They have actually had a couple of international things recently, I think, but they're still definitely
but they're not
struggling
long-term
in
practice.
comparison to Renegades, right?
Yeah.
So what's the solution?
If you want a team to be good in a region that's not good, I think that includes NA to some extent, you need to send them somewhere else. Like, you need to take them out of that place for a long period of time, and then they're not even like an Australian team. So like,
that doesn't feel like a long-term solution, though, right? Like that's.
It's not.
I mean,
But,
if
like,
if
that's
if
reality.
if we're just like to just like ship them off, like.
Yeah, exactly. It's cheating. Like, he's basically like parasiting off another esports scene, and like you're making Australia weaker too. Like, if we were in Australia the whole time, with Australia.
Sorry, keep going.
I was gonna say, like, if we were in Australia the whole time, Australia would be better now than it was. Like, we haven't helped Australia at all by leaving, have we? Really? we've drawn more attention to Australia, and we've justified more investment, which is good, but it hasn't actually helped them practice at all. So.
No. Right.
I think that the problem with Australia is like the population's so low that you'll never get a really competitive esports scene where you have multiple top level teams. And I think what really needs to happen, it's like, okay, let's look at Sweden. Why does Sweden produce good esports? It's like their population's even less than ours. Because they can play other countries. Yeah. Yes, they have a super region where they get to play other countries. And same with Canada, same with like any other country that has that sort of region to build off of. You've even seen like players from Mexico in the Overwatch League. Like, you couldn't do that as an Australian. There is no Australian players in the Overwatch League except for Costa, who left. So again, like leaving the scene completely. Yeah. So I think that like the geography is like the big problem there, and I think that like what we need to do, and this is going to sound ridiculous, I've said it before, there needs to be a super region there with Australia inside of another region. So SEA, for example, like we need to be able to play against Singaporean teams online. I don't know what like mountains have to move to make that possible, but like for example, the servers being in Sydney is already not. That's it. Like, that's not possible with the servers in Sydney, right? Like, that can't be done because Singaporean people get way too high ping to Sydney.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it does kind of feel like they're moving towards that, right? Like the fact that they've already got the divisions in the Overwatch League, and that combined with the initial plans that they talked about, does make it sound like eventually we're probably going to get some sort of like Asia Pacific region, and there's going to be a bunch of Overwatch League teams from there playing against each other. So I mean,
what's the incentive for the Australian Overwatch League team? I assume there will be one eventually. Like we have, we're as big as California. Why not?
Yep.
I'm sure. Plus, they need teams to fill up Asia Pacific region. There's not that many like big countries there. So, what's the incentive for this team to pick up Australian players?
Well, yeah, there's none. I mean, if you look,
there's literally no incentive.
Well,
like,
and of course, there's the whole like we can cheer for our homegrown heroes type thing. But as we've seen from the pickups overseas, that's not necessarily going to happen. I mean, there's London Spitfire literally has 12 Koreans on it, and a couple of the other teams have picked up full Korean rosters as well, right? So
it's a matter of, I think, if you look at like, okay, take us for an example. We're a good like test case for what would happen if you picked up Australian players and tried to like bring them into a bigger scene. Keep in mind that Australian team in Australia still couldn't practice. So like, despite the fact they'd be an Overwatch League team, they wouldn't be able to practice at all. Look at someone like Kubu or Huss, like these players we picked up from Australia. When they came into scrims in Taiwan, they were getting annihilated. Like, they were clearly below the team in terms of their level, but not in terms of their talent, just in terms of the exposure they'd had. Like, just that months of being able to play against top Korean teams. Like, our last 3 scrim partners were like Runaway, Gunbasson, and African Freaks. Like, you really get good scrims being us. Yeah, we get some really amazing scrim. And like, 3 months later, of these clearly talented, but like not very good players from Australia being brought into that scrim environment, they're objectively good players now, right? It's like but that took 3 months. Like, that's a very long time, and you can't have that kind of time when you're an Overwatch League team and you want to like be good. You know, you can't have to have like a 3-month waiting period on every recruit to get them up to the same level as like people you just picked up overseas. Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree with that, especially when you look at how long the off season is for Overwatch, right? So if you're building your roster far enough in advance, you could have that 3 months of scrims before the Overwatch League season even starts.
Yeah, it's just a matter of is that team going to be based in Australia though?
Well, yeah, that's the next question, right? Like, how do you
then
get
they're
around
screwed.
that?
Like, I've been coaching some scrims recently with like the top Australian teams, like just to practice. They've let me do that. Like mainly Kings, who just won. I'll take credit. No, it wasn't me at all. I coached 2 scrims.
Bi-monthly roll, all on Gunba.
I gave some tips for the match. Okay, you know, like there was some help there, but they did some maps on their own. Like Junkertown was totally them. That was awesome. But like, I lost my train of thought. What was the question? I got sidetracked into boasting about coaching.
we're talking about how an Australian Overwatch League team, specifically an Overwatch
Oh,
League
of course.
team,
Okay,
could be
yeah, okay, I
competitive.
got it, I got it. They're playing on Korean servers on 150 ping every day. That's what they're doing to improve, because that's what we did. So everyone does that
Yeah,
now. That's the
yeah.
common Australian thing to do.
Hmm.
And they're just like they're getting annihilated by terrible Korean teams because their ping's too high and they can't play Genji, for example. Like heroes just don't work on high ping. So I think that's like unsustainable. Like being an Australian team and trying to practice overseas is unsustainable at the moment. Well, it's obviously sustainable, but it's not a good long-term solution, especially for like player happiness. We have to play on 150 ping every day. You know? Yeah.
And you guys, yeah, exactly. You would have all experienced that for months before you got to go over and you got your opportunity at
Well,
OPC.
the thing is, we had me, and like I'm very good with VPNs and stuff, so I was able to solve like a lot of our problems. So like we got way better ping than you'd expect. Whereas like I've been listening, I haven't helped these guys with Mudfish at all. I've been like purely focused on like game coaching. But I've been in like in their voice and stuff, listening to them, and they've just been complaining about their Mudfish being broken the whole time. You know, like, about their VPN software being broken.
Right.
So like, yeah, again, we lucked out, and I know how to use VPNs really well. Like it's just the stars aligned for our team in a way that they won't align for other teams.
Okay. Well, let's talk about a little bit about your time as a flex support for Blank. So obviously, you improved a lot, as you just talked about, over your time, right? But I think even within Blank, you probably improved more compared to a lot of your teammates.
The most, I think.
Yeah, because I definitely agree with you there, right? Like when we looked at you at the lineup at the start of OP Season 1, like, I mean, I think probably a lot of other people actually, thought you were the weakest player on the team, right? And then you just put in like a ton of work and grinded and grinded. Not only the scrims, but like, playing competitive outside of that, I think just to sharpen those mechanics to the point where now you're, like just an extremely good flex support player. So yeah, talk to me about that.
Okay, so I guess like people might be interested to hear how I improved, because I think that's the most interesting thing. I got to like 4600 in the first 2 weeks of a season from being like literally a 4200 player. Like I couldn't get past 4200. My mechanics were awful. I got all the way to 4600 in a very short period of time through like an improvement process. So I guess I'll go into that. Firstly, again, there's no substitute for hard work, and that means more than just scrims. It means like taking scrims seriously the whole time. It means going into comp after scrims for 3 hours. It means when you go to bed, watching VODs for 2 hours and just literally taking notes. So if that's how you want to get to like the top and you want to be a really good player and you want to improve and you have like potential, that's 100% the solution. If you want to be the best, you just work super hard. Bring it back to XQC again, a player that does that. Like a player that I think objectively speaking was quite weak early on, just like me, right? And he's worked super hard and now he's in an Overwatch League team, right? So I think like that's a big part of it, just the work ethic. But also I use tools to help as well. Like I tracked maps in comps. I use like one of those comp tracker sheets. I made my own, but like there's nothing great about mine.
Spreadsheet so master Gunba.
Yeah, someone could use another one online. They're all the same. And I tracked like map stats for the maps that I was losing the most SR on to work out, because the performance gain system works, right? So it's like you get better performance in game, you get more SR.
Sure.
So if I can correlate that to the map, I can tell which maps I'm actually not performing on statistically. So that was really important. And then also I used like another improvement tool. So I had like a system of notes, so I could track all these notes down, like do this better, do that better, prioritize it, stuff like that. And then I used a spreadsheet to create like an output screen that would tell me what to focus on for each map. So it's really a good way to like aggregate all the things I had to improve on and get them like pushed back to me at the right time. And that came from like the VOD reviews, obviously, and things that my coaches said and stuff like that.
So give us a couple of examples. So say you were, going into King's Row or something, like what would your notes have said?
So I'd pull up my notes tool, I'd put in King's Row attack, like whatever start I'm on, and my hero, and it would just list all the things for that. I would list like hero specific, map specific things. So if like the hero specific things were always like agnostic of the map, so it was the stuff that was like applies to the hero everywhere. So like for example, holding trance when they have a blade or a graviton, for example, right? It's commonly tempting to like you see a tank slow and you're like, I could save everybody. And then all you really do is ensure that you lose because you don't have the trance for the, that's a really obvious one, but you don't have the trance for the blade or the grav, right? So like learning how to die with trance, especially with Mercy on the meta, and learning how to like let people die when you have trance is like a really big part of improving. And that was a note that I got repeatedly.
Just having that patience.
As for like as for maps, for example, I noticed on King's Row, like I'd walk up to the statue on attack. I'd go around the statue to the right, so past the small pack, and I would play kind of like near the car. There's a little card there next to the health pack. I'd play kind of in the open. And like one of the things I noticed is that if I played closer to the health pack in a lot of my situations where I died, again through watching the VOD, that I would be able to live. Like using the cubby, like with the health pack,
Mm.
I'd get a lot better. Literally moving myself 1 meter across would improve my survivability like by a lot. So that's like a King's Row specific note. Yeah.
Okay.
You kind of see how like you can sort of like mold yourself into a better player by watching
Yeah,
yourself play,
exactly.
and then
Because it's all those little things, right? I think that's definitely something that's important to note is that when you're trying to get to that very tip top level, when you're trying to be like one of the best players in the world, a lot of the improvements, it's not like aim better or something. It's just those tiny things that that increase the little percentages, and they all add up in the end.
Yeah,
and
I think
make
that
you a
like
better player.
if so say you told a player you went to a Zen player and you're like, hey, you don't play statue well on King's Row. You need to play closer to the health pack. If you told them that information, how would that be useful? They wouldn't remember that at all. They'd go into King's Row and they would just they'd not remember it, or it wouldn't sync in like as an important thing, unless like it cost them a game or something, and then tends to sync in a bit better. But because I had this tool that would like constantly remind me of things that were like specific to my specific circumstance at that time, so like being on King's Row and comp, I was able to improve a lot more just because the notes were always relevant to what I was doing.
Right. And so every time you went into that game, you were like, okay, this game, I'm focusing on holding trance. And like, and then it becomes second nature after you've done it a couple of times.
And then you move it down in the priority list, and my tool brings up something else more important. So it's like
Right.
prioritized in a list. So that's really important as well, as having that system where you can like, I've improved at this. And I've been applying that system to help out Kings as well. Like Tung's a player that's improved. Even in 2 scrims, Tung has improved more than any other player on that team, just alone because of things that he's been told that are like specific to how he uses ultimate, stuff like that. It was like really awesome to watch them play in their game in the bi-monthly brawl and just have like things that were in my note tool come out on screen. Yeah, like he totally denied Nesty's ults every single time, and that was awesome to watch. Like, it was good to see that improvement from him.
Okay, and what do
it
you
shows
think
that the process can work with other people from like a coaching point of view.
Yeah, it's definitely applicable. And what do you think about the skill ceiling for flex supports in general? So obviously within the support group, you've got your person who plays sort of the main support, which might be like your Lucio or your Mercy.
Main healer, for sure, yeah.
Which, I think historically everyone would say, has a lower skill ceiling than
the
person who's playing Ana, Zen, or now Moira.
Counterpoint.
Right?
About that specific main healer role, that role has like one of the highest skill caps in terms of the value that a player could bring in that role in terms of comms.
With calling and tracking ults and that sort of stuff.
But you can't see the comms on the screen, so it's like all Lucios look the same. And I've seen like, it's been like a real eye-opener to see how like some Lucio players don't call much and some call a lot, and like some flex support players really get calling, and like I totally thought differently about these players until I saw that in the scrims, right?
Okay. Yeah, but so what do you think about the skill set, especially with Moira coming into it? Especially compared to like DPS and tanks, just even mechanically, without going into sort of the calling and how effective you can be with that sort of thing. How do you think it compares?
I think flex supports have to play the most, as well as like flex DPS players like the Genji soldier player. They have to play the most like varying heroes in terms of their design. So like the tank heroes have a lot of similarities in terms of how you play them. They engage in a similar way, like playing the same kind of role on your team. You have to make decisions. But if you look at the flex supports, especially like Sombra included, if you count that as a flexible hero.
True. Yeah.
Sombra's a hero you have to call engages. You have to set up engages as a support player and like hack health packs and as well as like context sensitive stuff there, like how to play around different things and play around ults differently. And then Ana's just like a tank healer, so you can play super safe and like try and heal and like totally like skill based with projectiles like grenades and stuff like that. And then Zen's more of like a multitasking hero with like heals and damage. So like you have all these different contexts that you have to play in that are like completely different, and the way you play is completely different, and your thought process is different. So I think like with flex supports more than any other role, you'll commonly see flex support players be only good at a certain subset of the flex support heroes. So I'm really good at Zen, but my Ana's terrible. Like not terrible, but like well below my Zen.
Yeah.
Because like it's very hard to be a flexible player that's good at all of the heroes. Yeah, I think that's one of the things about skill ceiling that's relevant. As for the actual skill ceiling, I think that like flex supports on like a base level are more forgiving than like DPS, for example. There's almost like no hit scan in flex support, and all the projectiles are quite big and like quite fast. So, and the ultimates are usually pretty easy to use too. Like it's easy to say over like a rule to how to use trance. Oh, they have Genji Blade. I'm not using trance no matter what. Great. Like you've already done better than like 99% of people playing Zen.
Yeah.
Whereas I think a lot of the DPS ones require like more. You have to be proactive. You have to actually identify opportunities to use your ultimate and make like complex judgments. So I think in that respect, flex support's are actually like one of the lower skill ceiling roles. It's just that you have to play so many heroes that are so like different to each other that it's a bit harder sometimes.
Okay, interesting. Especially to hear someone who plays them himself. So
okay, also like playing soldier as a flex support again, just like one of those contexts that you need, right?
Yeah,
Not as relevant now, but has
it,
been
yeah, it
historically.
came in a little bit, right? Like, but yeah, we haven't seen much of those one support
It'll come
comps
back now with Mercy
recently.
being nerfed, maybe. We'll see.
You think? And what about just quickly? What about Moira? Have you had much of a go with
Moira,
her? Any idea how she'll fit in?
I've actually played Overwatch in 2 weeks. I've been purely focusing on like opportunities and stuff like that. I'm really
Yep.
busy. Moira, watching her, like I've seen. The funny thing is, people have said so many different things about what she's going to be used with. Like, is she going to be like used with tanks, or used with dive, or is she going to be used with like sort of mixed comp? And like, I think a lot of people just have no idea what they're talking about. That's like the only way to put it.
Yeah.
Like they just like said that she can be used with every comp, and it's like you've solved nothing. As for like what I actually think about it, like having watched her in scrims, I think she's like an extremely good dive healer, and her throughput is like really strong, and I think that's a big deal because I noticed that like I was watching a team like in scrims. I think it was Kings or something, Mastermind or something. I was playing Soldier Tracer, which is like a really common dive comp.
Yep.
And it's like a more passive dive comp, right? It's like you have a really strong backline, you're shooting at like stuff that your tanks are on. I noticed that Moira shut that down completely. Like they didn't have the throughput to kill things when Moira was healing them, and the Moira like we were playing against was really good. So like there's heaps of healing going on. So like I think she changes the meta in a sense that if she is being played, a lot of the conventional ways to like kill players in the game don't work anymore. And like suddenly like one shots become really attractive. Like Roadhog was really good, and like Genji blades are really good. She doesn't bring a support ultimate. Yeah, and she doesn't bring a support ultimate. Seeing like DPS ultimate hero is really good. I definitely think she stopped Soldier Tracer being played really hard though. And that was like, regardless of what she's being played with, I think she counters that comp super hard. And that's like the most common comp in the game, so I think that's a big deal.
Wow. Okay.
She's also super weak to other heroes though, like Pharah and stuff. So I mean,
and who do you think she's going to be replacing out of the other supports? So I think
she replaces the flex support. At least that's what I've seen.
Yep.
Yeah, but it does feel to me like she seems more like a main healer, like Lucio role. I don't know, like is speed boost too important? Maybe it is. Yeah. I noticed the teams that like had Moira that didn't have flex support heroes, so they had like Lucio, Moira, had a lot of trouble killing stuff. They wouldn't die, but they have a lot of trouble killing stuff, which is why those one-shot heroes were so good. You can just like one-shot someone randomly. So I don't know. I'm not too convinced like she's going to be played that much, but she does seem really good on paper. I'm sure there's potential there.
Yeah, yeah. Especially, yeah. The ult looks pretty nice as well. But
the ultimate, I don't think it's good. I think it's
no?
bad because it's like a DPS ultimate on a support hero. So it's like that's taking up a slot that you usually have a defensive ultimate in.
But it wasn't like that was a reason why people didn't like Anna.
It was though. Like Anna's like bonus was her throughput, and the fact that the ult used to be super broken as well. If you remember, it was like crazy broken ultimate back when you get like full movement speed with a Ryan.
Speed boost was like, yeah, that was just silly. That was.
So I definitely think that hero is like Anna's ultimate is seen as like a weak ultimate. I think in general. But like Moira's ultimate, I think people just kill her when she ults. It's like the first problem. Like you run at the Moira and she can't blink or anything, if I'm not mistaken. So it's super awkward. I've seen Moira's die in ultimate more than anything else. Like they usually don't die until they ult. It's just not like it's not that impactful of an ultimate. It's just like a damaging healing ultimate, which you can already do. So it's like it doesn't give you opportunities you didn't have before. I think the one thing I've seen it used for was killing Pharah Mercy. So I've seen that be used really well.
Wow. Okay. Because it does have quite a long range, I suppose.
Yeah, really long range. It does like heaps of damage. So.
Okay.
I think like Moira's a hero where it's tempting to do damage, but she does way more healing, and that's why there's a healing meter. Like that's why healing's a resource and not damage. So you should always focus on healing with that hero, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's your career as a player, but so you're looking to go into coaching
Anything else
now.
about being a player? Just trying to think. Do we leave anything unchecked?
Any like amazing clips that I need to show here to prove how good as an player you are?
Camera's no room. He's a support player, so it's like it's always on the DPS.
Yeah,
I think Apex is like the only tournament that actually watches support players, which is really frustrating. Everyone's like, Korea's flex supports are so good, and it's like, well, you never actually seen anyone else, so.
And you just want to watch like Rouge Hong like doing crazy stuff, right?
Of course. If you knew how good some of the flex supports were in these like Western tournaments or OPC, maybe you'd want to watch them too, but you just never get to see them. So. Whatever. I think that's it for players.
I was actually thinking about making another video entirely about that because it's something I think is actually going to have repercussions. But anyway, let's look to the future. Look to Coach Gunbo, who
Coach Gunba.
As far back as the World Cup stage in Sydney. I remember talking to you there, and you were considering it, or at least saying like at some point in the future, I really want there to be a Coach Gunba. So considering that we've just talked about you ramping up yourself as a player, right? You're probably in the best shape you've pretty much been ever as a player, both in terms of how you're working mechanically and where you are in in terms of the team, right? Like your team is just
And the events coming up and stuff like that, like the
yeah,
Nintendo stuff going on and stuff
exactly.
like that.
So it seems strange to me that this is the position where you choose to transition over to being a coach when, like, you know, everything on that side, on the player side, is going really well for you. So what,
Okay.
you know, what's going on there?
So I guess there's a few things to talk about. One is that I'm glad you mentioned that I want to be a coach at the World Cup when I talked to you, because that was a long time ago. It was like a few months ago. I was worried that losing to Canada and then wanting to become a coach would make it seem like I just wanted to coach because we lost, you know, whatever. Like, but regardless of that result,
Yeah.
I had intended to do this, and this is like it's
Can
actually
confirm.
there isn't the timing. The timing is now is because of the break that we have. Nothing until March, as far as I'm aware. For like, I think that goes for like almost every region.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's NA or U, but I imagine it's probably about the same. So like, we know there's a huge break there, and it's like the only window of time I've had where I wouldn't screw the team over by leaving. So that's why I want to do this. Overwatch League. Another relevant point is that like OPC just hasn't been included in that. So we see OPC as like a feeder tournament for Overwatch League, and then you have players like Bacon Jack and stuff, who are probably better than like most of the Overwatch League choices, and yet they didn't even get invited to trials or anything like that. They're just like totally excluded from that process.
Yeah.
And same goes for like support stuff. So I think that like trying to be a pro player in this region so far has proven to be an ineffective way of getting to the top tier, even if you could be a top tier player. And let's talk about that. So like, as far as being a flex support goes, not to bring it back to like the player point too much, I'm pretty sure I could beat a lot of the flex supports in Overwatch League. Like just like in terms of how much I can improve with like a better support system as well. Like I've had the worst possible conditions a lot of the time because of our like lack of infrastructure in Taiwan. And so I've dealt with that fine, and like I could have been like a way better player had I had like infrastructure elsewhere. And yet, you know, it's not even about me, because like the fact that I could be better than some of these Overwatch League supports is basically irrelevant, because there's players way better than me that aren't the Overwatch League as well. So like if I look into the line of who deserves to be in the Overwatch League, I'm pretty far down that line in my opinion. Like there's some really good Korean flex supports, at least I've experienced with, like Lucid, for example. Hagopin, I think he got in now, but you see what I mean. Like there's players that have been left out a little bit so far. So trying to go as a player into that would be wrong, I think. If I did get into the Overwatch League as a player, it would have been in spite of the fact that someone better than me didn't get in.
Do you think that you wouldn't get in even when you consider, say, in another season's time, there's going to be an extra, who knows, like 5, 10 more Overwatch League teams?
But counterpoint, there's going to be way more exposure then as well, and there's going to be more players looking to get in, and more people coming of age and turning 18 and so on. So like, I don't think the team increase will necessarily be more than the player base increase, in a sense of like,
fair enough. Yeah.
It's definitely far more like viable to become a pro player with the Overwatch League ramping up than otherwise. So I expect more interest there than less.
And you are, I mean, so how old are you exactly?
25.
Right. Oh, okay. So it's, yeah, I mean...
I'm also old. Yeah, that's not a problem. Like,
it's like,
what's my career as a player like?
Yeah, it's, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I think these are all
just
like
people some context on that as well.
Yeah, I was like a 25-year-old software engineer, and then got into pro play, and then quit my job. Intelligent decisions, as the meme goes. So like, I think those are all like relevant facts into why, or factors into why I want to become a coach.
Yep.
But the central reason is actually just that I feel like I have the ability to be a tier 1 coach. Not to use the tier system because I hate that shit, but I have the ability to be a top tier coach. I don't really have the you know, at least biological ability to be a top tier player. I don't think like I'm talented enough mechanically, for example. I've seen some like crazy players, and I just look at them, I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I'll never be able to do that. No amount of practice is going to change that. So I've already had all the practice, right? So I've seen my peak, I think.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to have a place in Overwatch League, it's as a coach. It's as a support staff, and like that's what really works well with what I'm good at. So like software engineering leads really well into that, spreadsheet stuff like that. I have like really good game analysis, even as a player. Like jokes about spreadsheets, okay. There's nothing funny about spreadsheets, man. It's serious. So I've always had like really good analysis, even within blank. So all the signs point to that being a good idea, and being a player being just like an average idea, at least in my eyes. So that's the path forward for me, at least.
And I guess, you know, there's a lot of benefits to it, right? Like the lifespan of a coach is a lot longer than the lifespan of a player.
Again, I'm 25, so
considering how long they are saying that they want Overwatch League to last for, and you know how long esports is going to be around. So. At least 4 years. Oh, come on, man. There's no way people are putting in $20 million and expecting it to only be around for 4 years. I think they're hoping for it to be a lot. They're hoping for more than that,
but that's like the minimum. So like, I think that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've heard that. Somewhere at BlizzCon I heard that. I remember who it was from. Probably not a reputable source, though. I didn't talk to anyone important enough.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, don't quote that. I have no idea. Could have been speculation.
Massive leaks that Gunba's trying to cover up here. We can see it.
I just like remember hearing that. I don't remember who I heard it from, so I don't know if I'm actually leaking.
Okay, plausible deniability through faulty memory. Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so obviously you said your intention is to be like an Overwatch League coach. You don't want to be doing anything less than that. So yeah, and you also mentioned you've started trying to do some stuff with Kings. So how are you feeling about that? How are you feeling about the whole coaching process? Since
so as for
having
coaching,
a little bit of a practice.
I figured that if I'm going to be an Overwatch League coach, I should probably learn to coach any team. Like, there's definitely people grinding it out there. Like, I've seen people like trying to coach, Australian teams, like international players, stuff like that. It's like what gives me the right to skip that process. So I have been coaching Kings, and like masterminds when Kings aren't around. It's been like literally 2 scrims and 1 scrim respectively.
Okay.
But it's been really positive. Like, I've been using a lot of the tools I talked about before to do that, and like try and be a better coach in the sense that
tools
everything's tracked and noted down. Yeah, massive spreadsheets, lots of spreadsheets. Okay. Yeah, and it's been really successful, and the feedback's been excellent. And I've seen the results in game improve as well. Like, I've seen them employ the things I talk about well, and like I've gotten that stuff across to players. That's felt really good. The fact that it is as easy as I thought it would be, because so much value in like
you heard it here first. Becoming a coach because it's way easier than being a player.
It's easy for me because I have a lot of the assets that needs. So it's just like I fit that role well, I think. I have very good like judgment about like what things, how you could change things that your players are doing to counter things they run into. So that sort of hindsight analysis into improvement. I want to get more into like the speculation side of it, like watch out for this, watch out for that. But see, that's what the spreadsheets are for.
Yeah, of course. So what about so if you're looking to be an Overwatch League coach, are you specifically looking? I'm just trying to differentiate between the different types of support staff here, right? So obviously you've got your coaches, and I think there's a lot of different attributes and ways that you can coach a team, right? Like you can be
support staff is a better term than the actual job titles, yeah.
Yeah, because you can be like sort of the moral support for the team. You can be you can be the hype man, someone who's like getting everybody excited. You can be more of what I'd call an analyst role, where you're specifically just looking over the games and working out exactly what you should be doing in game. You can be a sort of like the statistics master who's tracking things and being like, oh no, this actually looks like our best map, and these guys aren't so good on it, so like on that side of things, or or probably what would end up being like a mix of all of the above. So where do you sort of see your strengths, and for the sort of things that you're maybe you've been talking to teams about or anything like that, like what kind of role do you see yourself fitting into?
Firstly, I think as far as fitting into a role goes, most of the actual opportunities available are, I'm talking to like a lot of teams, and like contenders teams as well. Most opportunities actually are available are analyst roles. That's what they want, because most of these teams already have full support stuff. Right. But the reality is that like there's no infrastructure in Overwatch to be a full-time analyst that just does data analytics and like make subjective opinions based on data and like watching VODs. So I think my goal is to be like maybe 60-70% analyst, like watching videos and noting down all the things that went wrong and stuff like that, and then doing data statistics as well, which I've already set up like some spreadsheets and stuff for that. So I'm like prepared for that role if it works out. And then like the remaining percentage, like the 30 to 40, is coaching, like communicating with players and actually giving them your feedback directly. And again, it depends on the infrastructure of any given team, but yeah, I definitely think that I see myself as like mostly analyst, sometimes coach kind of thing.
Right. Okay.
I do want to learn to be better at the people aspect of it, like just communicating with people. And I'm never going to be like the social type, but you still have to convey your ideas to people, or someone has to do that. So I want to learn to do that better.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, exactly. If you're in that sort of role, like you've got no other option, right? And sometimes you've got to be the sort of the grease between the wheels of the players that sort of makes that that work.
I definitely think in terms of like the actual analysis side of it, that's kind of where I feel like I'm a strong contender. Like that's where I feel like I could be absolutely one of the best.
Because there's not a lot of people out there with like the sort of very high level experience that you've got, because it's such a young game that not many people have retired yet, So it's like there's very few people who have gained a whole bunch of Overwatch experience and then like retired to put it to use.
Again, I think that's the whole player analyst thing. I think if you see a lot of like people that start off as coaches or start off as analysts and never actually play the game or never play at that high level, they're always going to be marred by the fact that it's not a merit-based system. In reality, they've just convinced someone to hire them. That's how that works, right? Like, and they might be talented. I mean, they could be good at their job, but there's no number like your SR, for example, or your tournament winnings or whatever that says that person's good at their job. It's just totally subjective opinion, and like that's where hiring, I think, players to do these jobs is a good like potential like route to take. Is that you at least know that someone is a talented player. They understand the game factually. You have an objective measure of that. I think that's important, and that's like why player analysts and coaches are so popular.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the other measure that we see for teams is like the one where I like respect the coach a lot is where they've produced a team that's successful, and they've been there for that. Okay, you look at like Boston's coach Krusty. I think people like shit on Boston all the time, and fair enough, whatever. Like, you're allowed to question their roster. I mean, that's I get it. Toronto Esports. Yeah. I know like half the players in their roster. Watch what you're saying. Their coach in particular has been behind WNV Korea, who are like an immensely successful team. And then he moved on to NC Foxes and built a roster from scratch with that organization. Immensely successful once again. Like, okay, not the best team, but within one season they got to like the semifinals of Apex, right? From being like a weak challenger team. So like, that's also, I think that's where merit comes in for coaches, their actual achievements. It's just there hasn't been enough time for like teams to achieve a lot in Overwatch, or at least like consistent enough rosters with the same.
Hasn't been enough time. Hasn't been enough tournaments. I mean,
there's a couple like a tournament's the bigger issue. Yeah. So I think merit-based hiring is really important, and it's something we haven't really seen with the Overwatch League as much as I'd like. But it'll get better, and especially when like it's proven to work, it'll get better as well. Like the teams that do it win, right? So you filter out a lot of the people who aren't doing the job anyway.
All right. Well, I think it's almost been an hour, so let's a couple of fun questions to finish off with. So obviously the original team, as we talked about before, was the Fusion Girl. Who do you think was the girliest Fusion Girl?
Kiki.
Definitely Kiki.
He's so cute looking, man. Look at him.
He is.
Fucking adorable.
Okay, awesome. What's been the best experience you've had at LAN so far?
Jesus, that's a hard one. We haven't won any LANs, so it's never been that sort of positive outcome.
Yeah, okay, there's not like a trophy lifting situation. Sadly, the Summer Series wasn't a LAN in the end, even though you guys won that, and then you sort of went over to OPC before CG and the ESL LANs happened.
The best LAN, that's really hard. I don't even think it was the World Cup for me. I didn't like the World Cup at all because I didn't play well.
The group stages.
And I'm the kind of person.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't play well, and I didn't. If you watch like that match on stage after we win, I wasn't even cheering or anything. I wasn't even excited. I was actually kind of depressed because my performance is important to me. Right, like I want to perform well, and it doesn't feel like a win if I didn't do well. Right.
So you weren't in there like with the group hug with Uber and everything?
Not so much. No.
Wow.
I was kind of sad that I didn't play well. I think that's like really what I thought about that. That was like the most important thing to me.
Okay, well we'll leave that one as like saddest Gunba LAN experience.
Let's go with MY. Because even though we lost, and I think that we didn't play well, I think I played extremely well in that match. So I was really happy with myself, and that's what matters to me. So the MY match, I think I had a really strong performance. Yeah.
Okay.
Camera wasn't on me at all, but I still played well, so I guess that doesn't matter.
Yeah, tilted. I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I think that's going to be really important going forward, actually. Even just, like, inspiring new people to, like, play, tanks and supports. Like, if you're only watching the DPS, then, like...
Well, here's the bigger problem. It's like, if you're a support player and you're extremely good, how do you get your name out there? How do you prove to people that you're the best player? So, like... And how does that impact playstyles? So what have we seen top Zen players doing, for example? They consistently go for kills. They're super aggressive, they frag out, they try and get as many kills as possible. And we saw Cox do that in the APAC final, and you go on Reddit, everyone's like, wow, Cox is so good, he's getting so many kills. And then you look at the actual stats, and he's getting dumpstered by Hagapin. And Hagapin's probably like, maybe even the best flex support in the world, and nobody even knows who he is. It's like, because he doesn't suicide to kill people. He just like plays the game like a normal person.
Yeah, like I know I have that problem as a caster, right? Because a lot of the time, and until we get those stats, which, oh my god, I'm like so excited for. Until we get those stats to be able to look at people in a more objective way, even if I'm looking at it from a bird's eye view, like it's quite hard to tell the impact that those support players are having, because if you don't see them in the kill feed, unless you're seeing them pull out a really nice beat or a trance, which to be fair, like if I ever see that happen, like I always make sure to call it out, because I know like they're not getting any love at any other time, right?
How good does a good trance even look? Like you heal some people, great. It's not nearly as cool as getting a 6-man blade kill, but you might save 6 people. You wouldn't Like
Yeah.
you can't even objectively tell that you saved 6 people because they didn't die. So how do you know that you saved them, right?
Problems
Like,
of
I
being
just think that,
a
like,
support player.
I think stats will come out and they'll fix that. But it's been ridiculous up until now that like we've had to try and qualify into the Overwatch League and like try and get our players into the Overwatch League and whatever, like all these aspiring Overwatch League players with no stats. So all the routes to the Overwatch League are just ridiculous. Like they're just totally popularity based and like that's how you get tryouts. I think like there's only like literally one player in the entirety of OPC that got a tryout for an Overwatch League team as a reference. Like that's insane to me. That seems so ridiculous.
So what
So
was
like
that? Only one player in OPC?
got into the Overwatch League as a trial. Like just literally got to try out for a team.
Wow. Did anyone in the
This is
OPC
no
actually get into the Overwatch League?
No.
No. Wow.
And that's why exposure is so important.
Hmm.
I've talked to these like owners and stuff, asked them like, why didn't you get any OPC players? And they were like, we didn't know anything about OPC. And it's like that's the
Wow.
measure. That's how.
God, surely that's their like general manager or whoever's doing the recruiting's problem for not looking far and wide enough.
But none of them did it. So I mean, and you can't even trial them because they're online. So it's like, but like,
Yeah,
I guess
that's
imagine
another
if you had
problem.
like a system where you're an Overwatch League recruiter and you're going into like stats and you're going to look at which players do I want to recruit, and it's just a list of the best players in each tournament. And these saw Bacon Jack right at the top of OPC. You'd think, I'm going to look into that guy because I got some stats that tell me that he's a good player and
Yeah.
it's worth at least investing. But because there's none of that, and it's just like whoever gets the most camera time, bad luck. Bad luck, OPC friends. Should have been in NA.
Yep. Well,
That's why it's a side note. I get frustrated just like looking at like you see some NA players who are like they feel hard done by the Overwatch League. They feel like it let them down, And it's like you have no right to complain, like at all. There's like Taiwanese players way better than you that didn't even try out. So it's like you deal with it,
Well, hopefully we'll see some of them either in maybe some teams will do more research by that mid OPs.
Well, if
mid
like
Overwatch
if
League
there's
trade
more like
week.
contenders tournaments and stuff, I think that like these players will get more chances. Like there'll be more exposure on this region moving forward. There's like a tier 2 scene, hopefully. So
Yeah.
well, see if people actually choose to watch Taiwan tournaments, but we'll see.
Hopefully it'll be better for all of us, especially in Australia where we've had we've definitely been struggling to get some tournaments of late.
The Australian way, unfortunately.
And it may be another couple of months yet, but like either way, thank you very much for coming on and having a chat, Gunba. Hope you had a good time.
No problem. Sorry if I rambled for a bit.
That's good. That's what you're here for, man. That's the only reason
Okay.
I got you here. No rambling, no bueno. No interview.
Alright.
So, yep. Thanks for representing our country. Thanks for doing well in OPC.
Sorry, I let you down a little bit, but we got to the finals. Better than Taiwan did.
Yeah, look, I think being able to see you in the grand final, especially in season 1, was still pretty awesome. And even doing well and getting out of group stages in APAC was pretty cool as well. And of course, we were all very happy to have a team to cheer for BlizzCon. So
Okay.
thank you for your service to the country, Gunbasson. And
If you can call it that, yep. No problem.
All right, we'll leave it there.